All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining me today for this month's webinar from the Arizona Rural Development Council, hosted in conjunction with Local First Arizona Foundation. So for anyone who isn't familiar with the AZRDC and Local First Arizona Foundation, we put on this monthly webinar that addresses various issues that are common and surround the development process specific to rural areas. And so we additionally don't want to just talk about problems, we want to talk about solutions. So today we have speakers from around the country addressing issues within trying to attract broadband access to your community. We also have participants from all around the country, which is amazing. And if you all want to engage with these webinars further, my contact information will be at the end of this presentation, and I will send you a email in about a week or so with the recording of this PowerPoint. So to get into some housekeeping, for audio and visual, for audio, make sure the volume is at the appropriate level. And for visual, make sure you have most other programs or windows closed. This sometimes can slow down your receiving access to the platform. If there's any severe issues, log off and log back on. That sometimes clears up everything. You just have to reset. So the webinar, as I mentioned, is being recorded and will be made available to you afterwards. And anyone who registered will receive this recording. And please feel free to share with anyone else. And so for question and answer, we will have short clarifying questions. These are just intermediate questions dispersed throughout. Sometimes we might probe you with some questions, but at the end of each speaker, we'll have some clarifying questions in case there was anything that you just didn't quite understand. But if you have a robust question, we ask that you wait until the end, and this way it allows all of our speakers their allocated time to speak and gives you still a fair amount of time for Q&A. And so we ask that you type your questions in the chat box, which you all have already engaged in. So I'm your facilitator, Maya Ozzie. I'm the Rural Program Coordinator at Local First Arizona Foundation. I have a background in sustainable natural resource management specific to rural areas, and sustainable tourism development and community development. For our presenters, Deb Sosha is the Executive Director of Next Century Cities, a nonprofit that strives to support community leaders across the country as they seek to ensure that all have access to fast, affordable, and reliable internet. We've got Blake Mobley. Blake is Rio Blanco County's IT Director and the Project Manager of the Rio Blanco Broadband Project. This project provides an FTTH solution in Meeker and Rangeley and a fixed wireless solution for rural Rio Blanco. Rio Blanco County is now the fastest internet county in Colorado. Looking forward to hearing how that happened, because some of us could really use some of that speed in our rural broadband access. Next, we have Miss Belinda Nelson. Nelson is a member of the Gila River Pima tribe and is active in various affairs of the Gila River Indian community. In 1989, Nelson was hired as the first employee of Gila River Telecommunications, Inc., and she has worked in various management positions of the company, including serving as general manager. She is currently serving as chairwoman of the Gila River Telecommunications, Inc. Board of Directors. And last but not least, we've got Bruce Holdridge. And over the past 35 years, Bruce has held various telecommunication management positions of increasing responsibility in engineering, network operations, regulatory and government affairs, sales, marketing, business development, customer service, finance, accounting. Bruce has firsthand, well-established, broad and technically diverse telecommunications background. So what we hope that you will take away from this, first, we want you to understand some different steps communities can make to ensure they are fiber ready. We've got alternative solutions to broadband access, how to work regionally or within a county, how to leverage any and all existing resources, and unique factors of cost to broadband development on tribal lands. So we're going to get started with Ms. Sosha's presentation, and from there we will move forward. Thank you, Deb.
Hi, can you hear me, Maya? Maya?
Yes, we can.
Hello? Hello? Maya?
Deb, we can hear you.
Yep, you're coming through on the conference bridge, and your presentation is on the board.
Okay, wonderful. I was concerned that nobody could hear me, so I appreciate your telling me, and I apologize for repeating myself. Always
Not
get a
at
little
all.
concerned at the beginning of a webinar to make sure that, everything's working the way it ought to. So thank you so much. So my name is Deb Sosha, and I am the Executive Director of Next Century Cities. And I wanted to talk to you about a few things today. I work with cities all over the country, 178 member communities, cities, towns, and counties, representing over 40 million Americans. And we were founded in October 2014, and we work with mayors and city leaders and CIOs and economic development folks and so forth within these communities who are committed to ensuring fast, reliable internet access for all. So we actually have 3 Arizona members, Mesa, Payson, and I see Payson is here, and Tucson. We have urban, suburban, and rural members. We have tiny, tiny counties where there are 400 residents, all the way up to great big cities. And the needs for rural communities are unique. And so today I'm going to really focus on that. I did some research regarding the state of broadband in Arizona, and I looked at a wide range of data. I looked at info from Broadband Now, NTIA, the FCC, 477 data. Arizona First has a great website with lots of info, as does the State Department of Education. It is important to note that the data is not wonderfully accurate, right? So what we know is limited by the accuracy of the data we're able to receive. I was recently at a meeting of the Technology and Communications Subcommittee on the Hill, and it was very clear that folks there are concerned with the accuracy of data, which really does not serve you well if the information is inaccurate. And I'll give you an example. If in the 477 FCC data, if one person within an entire census tract gets service, they consider the whole census tract served. And so that's not exactly helpful if you're in a huge census tract and you've only got one person in a corner that gets service. So not all providers are willing to make their data public, and with the caveat that not all the data is really accurate, here's what I found. 23% of school districts meet the national affordability benchmarks, which means that for most of the children and most of the schools in Arizona, and this is true across many rural lands, the speeds are not fast enough to manage the needs of education. Arizona is the 29th most connected state with an average speed of 39 megabits per second and 86% broadband coverage. But it varies mightily by county. So for example, Maricopa has 94% connectivity. Navajo is 45%. La Paz is 39%, and Apache is 0%. So you get to that northeast corner of the state and you really have limited access. So though the overall number sounds not so bad of an average of 39 megabits per second, that's not helpful if you can't get that everywhere. And so I'm going to share with you some steps you can take that will help you move forward with any projects you might consider. So first, be fiber ready. First I want to make sure you know that nextcenturycities.com has all of these resources open and free, and you can hop onto our site and do a search and find anything that I talk about today. So first you want to really think about your policies and your ordinances. Are they updated to include contemporary infrastructure? In other words, are your processes in place for old technology, or are you prepared for what's coming next? And how do you entice a partner to work with you? And part of that is having your ability to turn around applications for things like pole attachments or use of your right-of-way. That permitting process, if you can get it really fast and make your permitting more effective, that's very helpful and attractive to a provider. You want to think about dig once, and so dig once means whenever the road is dug up for any purpose, they drop in conduit into which that fiber can be placed. So, and it's pennies on the dollar compared to a full construction. And some of our members will put in this fiber, they'll put in dark fiber and lease it, they'll create an institutional network, connecting city buildings, police, schools, and libraries, or they'll build out to businesses. The next one is One Touch Make Ready and Climb Once. It's getting a lot of attention right now at the FCC, and this policy would allow one contractor to manage all of the pole attachments. Pole attachments are one of the #1 things that slows down deployment, and when you are faster, it is cheaper. So everyone agrees to use the same contractor, and it can help speed it up. Cities don't always own their own poles, of course, but it can be very helpful if you own poles. The small cell conversation is interesting, and I could literally spend an entire hour on this topic, and I suggest you reach out to me if you want more information about it. But don't be fooled into thinking this is a solution, because the 5G deployments that are going to happen across the country, first of all, aren't coming to rural communities anytime soon. And secondly, they are not wireless entirely. Somebody told me once it's one wire less. In other words, you've got to have fiber all the way out to that community for 5G to have any impact. So important to know, and I'm happy to share more information if you particularly want to know about that. Regarding asset management, making sure that you have a map of the location and type of assets that your community owns. Do you have light poles? Do you have infrastructure that you could share? How do you make that information public? How do you help people access that information as easily as possible? So now I'm going to talk about reviewing the landscape. What are the types of deployments that we're seeing across the country? And one of the great opportunities now I'm seeing are electric co-ops jumping into the broadband business. And an example here is the North Georgia Network Cooperative. In some cases, the co-ops have been a little hesitant to move forward. If you're finding that, please do contact me. I have some resources. There's also a great new resource on muninetworks.org. It's a great resource for many reasons, but they have really got this great new resource about electric co-ops. And the co-ops don't always want to build and manage. They're good at infrastructure. Sometimes they just want to build it. And so there are companies that will manage it and be the ISP. So it's a lot more flexible than people realize. Open access networks like Ammon, Idaho, they built and manage their fiber. And that what they did was they don't want to, in fact, in Idaho, they can't manage it because of a state law, but they get providers to use the network. So customers have choice, and they can easily swap between providers. Some are local, some are big providers that you might know, but they've done a great job of creating a new way of managing it. There's a great video on our YouTube page about Ammon, Idaho as well. And then municipal broadband, which you've likely heard about. An example is Wilson, North Carolina. They built and manage their own, and they have a utility. Some communities without a utility build and manage on their own anyway. Some, again, in this case, as with the electric co-ops, you don't have to manage it. You can just build it if you want to. There are so many options now available and so many different flavors of municipal broadband that you want to look at the whole landscape before you make a decision about what way to go. There's also a regional or county effort, and a really interesting one is RS Fiber in Winthrop, Minnesota. The hardest part of getting these types of opportunities to work well is getting everybody on board. I think it's pretty easy to get everybody to agree that they really want all of this. The problem is much more about getting them all to sign an agreement about how to do it. And so that took some work getting done. But boy, they saved a ton on the economy of scale and were able to be much, much more successful. There is a great report about their work on our site under resources. You just put in RS Fiber or Winthrop and you should be able to find that. Then public-private partnership, which I think is a great solution because it's shared risk and shared reward. The difficulty with public-private partnerships is finding a really good partner. And that is not always so easy in more rural communities. But if you can, and if you can work with a small regional provider, that's a very powerful way to get built. In Westminster, they partnered with Ting. So the city built and owns the network itself, but Ting uses the network, and they get certain guarantees from the city, and they both have an agreement in place about shared profits. But a great option here, if you don't want to manage and you don't want all the risk, the trouble is finding the right partner. One thing I say to our members is there really is no fairy broadband mother, and so you got to get moving, right? Figure out what you can do, find as many ways to advocate for your community and as many potential partnerships as you can. Get the lay of the land and see what you can do to move it forward. My next recommendation is to educate your team, and you're here on this webinar, so it sounds like you're already there. But there are some great webinars out there. Arizona First certainly is a great source of information, and there are others out there that you should access. And again, you can go to our website, or you could ask Maya. I'm sure that she also has a whole set of those. Finding toolkits, awesome way to look at what's happening. We have one coming out soon on civic engagement. We also do policy statements that may be helpful to you. We have an event next week. There are great conferences out there, but we have an event next week called City Vendor Connect, and it is in Kansas City. It's free to cities and city members to go to attend, and we'd love to have you attend it. It's on our site if you go to our site. And if you are a Next Century Cities member, we actually are giving folks a travel stipend. So anywhere you can find information. It's important to know what's going on at the FCC, on the Hill, in your state legislature. And, you know, many states have anti-municipal, Local First Arizona. Many states have anti-municipal broadband laws, and you do not. But you do have a 5G law that was part of a national lobbying effort, HB 2365, that was brought into place in April, that actually limits local choice around 5G deployment. So important to know what's going on and to be on top of it. Again, that's something we do every week. We email our members with information about what's happening here and at the state legislatures. And the FCC changes are pretty substantial at this point. Municipalnetworks.org, muninetworks.org is a great resource as well if you're considering moving into that space. So leveraging resources. one of the ways you can entice a partner to work with you, or you can save money, is to think about your rights of way, where they are, how they could be used, whether or not you can use some wireless technology and some fiber in order to get to the most rural of the furthest out of your homes. But looking at all of those options and what rights of way you might know. What is out there, right? What's happening out there? Reach out to the state of Arizona. We do have the state CIO on a video talking about Arizona on our website. Also, think a little bit about your permitting, as I mentioned before. E-rate is interesting. Arizona is actually a good place to use E-rate, which is the funding through the FCC and USAC that helps to connect schools and libraries. There is a 10% match required, but Arizona, the state, is actually paying that 10%. So there are great resources on the Arizona Department of Ed's site. There's a wonderful flow chart about how to do this, how to apply, what's available. So you might want to access that and take a look. We have another video on our site, Kimball Sika-Kwaptua from Santa Fe actually did a great job using E-rate to bring fiber to her community, and that fiber was used for the library and the schools, but she was able to also use that same infrastructure to bring fiber to the community. So again, it's a great option. There are changes at the FCC that may impact that, so you want to stay on top of it, but that's a great opportunity. You want to look at what available conduit or dark fiber you may already have, and once you have a dig once policy, keeping track of that and keeping management, knowing exactly where those assets are, is helpful. There are some funds available from the Rural Utility Service out of the USDA. The struggle we find with that is that's very hard to apply for and it's very hard to manage. But again, we've got folks from the RUS on webinars on our site. Community Reinvestment Act also is an option. Community Reinvestment Act allows banks to get credits for providing resources to build out infrastructure to rural communities, and it allows for broadband. And RS Fiber actually used that in their build, and so again, might be interesting to you. You want to investigate all of these options. So I suggest you join Next Century Cities. There is no cost to join. We'll keep you updated. We'll connect you city to city and town to town so you can learn from each other. Our goal is really about how do we get this country 100% connected, and that includes all areas of our country, tribal lands, rural communities, internet deserts in our cities, and so forth. So feel free to reach out, and I'd be happy to talk with you more offline if that would be helpful.
Awesome. Thank you, Deb, so much. Additionally, I just want to add that last month's webinar we had a speaker talking exclusively about the Community Reinvestment Act. So if you want a recording of that and you are registered for this webinar, please reach out to me via email and I will get that to you. Do we have any clarifying questions? Just short, brief questions, or if anything is more, of girth, then we can wait till the end. Deb, you do have a question in the main chat. If you could respond to that in the chat box, perhaps, or we'll answer it at the end if it's going to take a moment. For now, we will be...
I'll put something in the chat.
Okay, brilliant. We will be moving to Mr. Mobley, and Deb, if you could also answer Ryan's question as well. All right, Blake, take it away.
All right, well, thank you, Maya, and thanks to Local First Arizona for the opportunity to present to the group. My name is Blake Mobley. I'm the IT Director of Rio Blanco County, and on the slide in front of you, you can see where our county is. It's in the upper northwest corner of Colorado. We're a very rural county and a large land mass. We have about 6,800 total residents across about 3,200 square miles, sixth largest county in the state. And because of our project that we began in 2014, a little over 3 years ago, we are now the fastest broadband county in Colorado, using the definition that all of our towns, both of them, have gig fiber to the home available, and our rural residents have the opportunity for a 25 megabit per second solution rurally. So I'm going to go over kind of how we got to where we're at, what our story is, and the high-level major steps. Obviously, in 15 minutes, I can't drill too far down into the details, but kind of an overview of how we got here and what we did to accomplish in this particular project. So our story, my story, starts in 1999. I was the IT director for the school district in one of the two towns, Meeker. We built out one of the first fibered school districts in the state in '99. And that's really the beginning of the story, because in 2001, the Meeker MAN, Metropolitan Area Network Group, was formed between the school, the county, the town, the public library, and the hospital. And they came and said, hey, school district, can we use some of the dark fiber strands you deployed and make a little community anchor institution, CAI, Muni network? School said yes, and so the IT staff in Meeker started participating on regular monthly and quarterly meetings as we shared this infrastructure, which really paved the way for the rest of the project. And then in 2014, I transitioned from being director of the school district over to IT director of the county, and the broadband project for the whole county began. Milestones to date, just kind of real quick, in this year, 2017, we now have FTTX, fiber to the X means everywhere, construction done. We have, as of Monday, 580 lit customers. We're running at about a 60% take rate, which is a term meaning percent of homes and businesses that take service versus those that could take service. Our secondary towers are funded, and our primary towers are already built for the rural. So we've got fiber in the two towns. We've got the towers going out for the rural. And our network operator is already in the black, and we have a public-private partner, in this case a private partner, as our network operator. Plan for the remainder of this year is to finish lighting the primary towers this month. They actually got lit last Saturday. Start building out our secondary towers and add more last-mile connections. So this slide shows kind of a couple of examples of the technology we're using. The picture on the left with the red lines, that's the town of Meeker, our county seat town. And the red lines are all the primary fiber runs we did in that community. We used a microduct conduit. It's a technique where you use small mini ducts about the size of your finger that you can run the fiber through. We intentionally ran fiber in half of those ducts and leaving the other half empty for future expansion. And then we deployed a technology known as GPON, Gigabit Passive Optic Network, fancy name, but it's just a style of getting that service delivered out across the two towns. So we ran about 25 miles of mainline fiber in both towns each. That doesn't include the drop runs from the alley or street side to the home or business, but just down the streets, down the alleys. And then we connected those two towns 65 miles apart with fiber also, and we're running a technology that delivers 40 gigs as a backhaul between the two towns. For the rural component, this is actually a A&E architecture and engineering drawing of the closest primary tower out of the 8 that we deployed across the county initially as a backbone for the rural. And we built additional zones on these towers besides just broadband. Broadband's actually only the 3 little dots at the extreme top of the tower. Below that, we built a zone for deploying our emergency services radio system. Below that, we built a zone for FirstNet, the nationwide hardened cellular for emergency services. Below that, we built zones to attempt to entice in cell phone providers to our rural community, which is meeting with success. We have a Tier 1 provider that is working on a contract to locate on one of our towers actively right now. And then below that, we have backhaul and dishes out to secondary towers. So that's an example of the towers that are going to start deploying 25 megabits per second to the rural part of our county. The high-level steps of this project, 1 through 12 there: leap into the unknown, vision, set your policy goals, select a business model, plan the perfect storm and the money needed, partnerships and organizations, prep, environment and right-of-way, A&E, construction, O&M, and then go live. I've got a slide for each, and I'm going to just briefly touch on these because of the time, and we don't want to go too far into detail, but to give you a good overview of how we rolled our particular project out starting in 2014. The first step is that leap into the unknown, and Deborah Socius said it too. You need to do something, and that can be a challenging and kind of a scary step. But plan, I like the phrase, no project goes according to plan, but no project succeeds without one. And I'm going to lay this out. It's going to look nice and linear for Rio Blanco County, but the little blackboard drawing on the slide is more like how the plan actually unfolded in reality. It was a kind of a messy squiggle getting from starting point A to where we're at now, C. So this is going to be presented a little smoother than a project goes that's this complex. So the next step, vision, identify the need. We identified the need being very succinct that infrastructure is too expensive for the incumbents to build, and by infrastructure we mean modern broadband infrastructure, fiber, these large expensive towers, etc. The return on investment is too low for incumbents, so our options were we either wait for decades, plural, for this service to come to us and deliver modern high-speed broadband, or we solve the infrastructure challenge. Obviously, we elected option 2. Then you need to set your policy goals. So in our case, with the county and the county commissioners and our citizen input groups, we set our goals that we wanted the Google standard, simply put. So we wanted fast 1 gigabit service, just like Google's delivered in Kansas and Provo, Utah, and etc. We wanted it robust. We wanted not only broadband, but VoIP's a fancy term for phones and IPTV television system, etc. We wanted redundancy so that if a major link to our county failed, that the network would still stay up and provide service. And we wanted value. Specifically, we wanted Google pricing. We wanted 1 gig to a home or business in one of our 2 little towns for $70 a month. And a quote, broadband is less about getting ahead as a community, more about maintaining relevancy as a community. And there have been some studies in Colorado with high school graduating seniors and rural communities, and one of the most identified challenges of retaining population is broadband. Select a business model. And again, Deborah Socia mentioned open access networks and public-private partnerships. We're doing a combination of all of those. We're doing a 3-layered open access PPP, public-private partnership model. It doesn't matter if you choose to take on all 3 layers yourself as a county or a city, or whether you want to break these up and partner up with your electric co-op, or you want to do a P3. The roles still exist in any of these models. And there's a role of network owner, which means who's going to build and own that physical infrastructure. And in our case, that's Rio Blanco County. There's a network operator. Somebody's got to run the network, the business model, do O&M, operation maintenance. We contracted with Colorado Fiber Community, a private partner for that. And then somebody's got to deliver services, be a service provider. And then our network operator contracts with those service providers, and they elected 2 local small WISPs to deliver that service. And so that's how we broke the business model apart and deployed it in our P3 open access model. Plan the perfect storm. I'm not going to run through all the details on this slide, but the major components of the perfect storm for a broadband project, in my opinion, there's 4. You need leadership. In our case, that's our elected officials. The county commissioners had to be behind this. You need community ownership. Without that, if you don't have the rest of your community behind those elected officials, then you'll run into a challenge. Funding's a big challenge, and again, Deborah pointed out that you've got options with RUS, you've got public-private partnerships, there's FCC money, there's, in Colorado, our Department of Local Affairs had a broadband grant. We acquired $3.6 million out of $20 million for our project. And then the last major step is the project manager. Someone needs to, I heard a phrase, they need to wake up in the morning thinking about how to solve broadband in your community and go to sleep at night thinking about it. And in this case, that's my particular role. Next major step of implementing broadband is partnerships and organizations, and this is just huge. And down to the bottom center, there is communicate, communicate, communicate. You need to be talking to your community anchor institutions, your county government, your city government. Public works is huge and something I kind of missed early on, talking to the people that manage the streets and alleys in your towns. Economic development, chambers, BLM, USDA, you get the idea. You just need to really have a lot of meetings and talk to as many of these potential partners as you can. And then there's the preparation, the vision. And I like that phrase of shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you'll land amongst the stars. You know, we decided we're a little rural county, but hey, let's see if we can do Google class fiber and Google class price point and Google class speed in our two little towns and deploy true broadband rurally. And by shooting for that moon, we've actually pretty much hit it so far. And then there's getting down into the laws, regulations, environment, and right-of-ways. You got to start talking to your BLM for patents and right-of-way, Forest Service, state, CDOT, your municipalities and counties, your community anchor institutions for easements across their properties, private landowners that will be along the path. And you got to conduct your studies, your CDOT studies for cultural environmental impacts, your NEPA, similar, and then get your, if you're doing wireless, your RF frequency analysis. And there are companies out there that do all of this, so you don't have to take on all that complexity. You just need to find the companies and partners to do it with you and for you. Then you move into architecture and engineering, which is where it starts getting kind of exciting. In our case, we hired one company to engineer the fiber to the home fiber block deployment, a different company to engineer the tower wireless solution, a different company to engineer the data centers, remodeling a come and go in one case, and we added an extension to our courthouse in the other to bring this project to fruition. And then construction, when you actually get to start visually seeing the fruits of the labor. For the fiber deployment, we had a company hired that deployed the conduit and the handholds. Different company did the fiber pulling and jetting and splicing. And then for the tower and wireless side, we contracted with a different company than all the rest, so the fourth in the A&E and construction phase, to go out and build the towers, the sheds, the electronics, the site access, power grid, everything for us in our project. And then last, the data centers. We did an acquisition, like I said, of a come and go, gutted it, remodeled it, turned into a data center in our community of Rangeley. And in our community of Meeker, we did a remodel expansion onto our courthouse. And so get the construction done and you can actually see your project starting to come to fruition. It's starting to get exciting. Then you go operations and maintenance, which is a lot of legal work. So hopefully you've got a good, friendly relationship with your county or city attorney, because you're going to be giving them a lot of work to do. Network operations contract, middle mile contract, which middle mile is a term for getting that big pipe that feeds, in our case, our county from Denver, Colorado over. Local service providers, who's going to actually go out and, you know, the contracts and PALs, the premise access license, the easements to run the fiber into their homes, and then your SLAs, service level agreements on customer expectations. And then finally, you get to the go live state. We started going live on a limited basis just over a year ago, as the fiber and mostly the fiber at that stage was getting completed. But at this stage, we've climbed up to our 580 lit customers. We have pre-signed up right now in our community. Our total population is 6,800, so there's about 3,000 total homes and businesses, real rough numbers. We've got about 1,500 customers signed up for service, waiting for it to be delivered, the drop runs in the two towns, and another 500 signed up rurally. So our take rate has exceeded our expectations, which is a financial challenge for us and our partners, but it's I guess, a good financial challenge to have. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Blake. Do we have any clarifying questions for Blake? If so, type them in the chat and he can answer them for you. So next we will be moving on to Miss Belinda Nelson, and I will pass it over to you. Thank you, Belinda.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Maya, and thank you, local Arizona First for inviting us to be on the webinar today. My name is Belinda Nelson. I'm currently serving as the chairwoman for the board of directors, and we're from the Gila River Indian community just south of the Phoenix metropolitan area. For those of you in Arizona, you may know where we're located. And today I'm talking about some of the factors or unique factors in providing broadband to our community and tribal communities in the state and across the country. First, I want to start out by talking about just the general factors in providing broadband deployment throughout rural Arizona. Some of this was mentioned earlier in the previous presentations. We all experience and we're all familiar with providing broadband and the cost for our rural areas. Some of these factors in general are low population density, the high cost of infrastructure, and another factor is the terrain or the geographical conditions that we live in. Another factor is the state of economy. I think in rural parts of our states we don't enjoy the diverse economic drivers that maybe an urban or metropolitan area might have, and so we are kind of subject to one or two sources of industry, farming or mining or tourism or what have you. And then on top of that, just as a note for Indian tribes, we have a high level of unemployment in our reservations or in our communities. And moving on to the next slide, I just want to put a backdrop to Arizona. We have 21 tribes here in the state, living on 19 different reservations. Here on the Gila River Indian community, we have the Pima and the Maricopa. Our traditional names are Akimel Astem and Pipash, respectively. Each tribe has a sovereign tribal government. That is, we have our own tribal councils separate from each other. Some of them are operating, I guess, in similar manners, but nonetheless, we have our own unique tribal governments with different sizes. And let's see, moving on to the next slide, I just have here a map showing the locations of the reservations here in the state of Arizona. Many of the reservations are in the very rural parts of the state, away from the Phoenix metropolitan area. Many of the reservations are quite large in land base, particular to the Navajo Nation. The Hopi Nation is right in the middle of the Navajo reservation. We have the Apache reservations to the east, the eastern Arizona. We have the Tohono Nation down to the south, and their reservation extends across the international boundary into Mexico. Gila River is a small reservation land base-wise, and so we're that little green area just south of Phoenix, that stair-step, whatever it is. It looks diagram, yeah. It looks like a stair-step. So that's Gila River, and we enjoy the locality of being next to a major metropolitan area, but we're still rural. And talking about some of the costs that are unique to tribes, in addition to some of the factors I mentioned earlier, due to the history of the United States and the settling of the nation, and through treaties and through establishment of doctrines, federal doctrines dealing with Indian tribes, we are under federal jurisdiction. That is, all reservations are under federal jurisdiction. We have a government-to-government relationship. That is, the federal government recognizes each sovereign tribe and and we do not necessarily deal with the state as many of the entities do that provide broadband service. They're regulated, they're under the state jurisdiction. We are under federal, and so we have a straight government-to-government relationship with all federal agencies. We have to comply with the federal laws since we're under federal jurisdiction. This alone raises the cost of deploying broadband to our reservation. We have oversight of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Again, this goes back to history. We have to get approvals that have anything to do with land. Some tribes enjoy a self-governance model, that is, they can pretty much call the shots on their own without going through the Bureau of Indian Affairs for anything in the areas of health, education, economic development. Economic development, however, mostly deals with land and construction on land, so we as a phone company have to deal with the Bureau of Indian Affairs for final approvals on many things, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs is notorious for the slow timeline of approvals, just like any other federal agency, I guess I should say. We also have to comply with the environmental laws that are under federal policies. For instance, NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, I believe it is, that's what it stands for. Under the Clean Air Act, many of the environmental compliances involve getting the environmental impact statements, just addressing any issues to action of development on land, and this was mentioned earlier in previous presentations. Another area that raises costs for us is cultural compliance. That is, we have to adhere to what we call, just as a general language term, cultural hotspots. These are sites where perhaps there's burial grounds, there's sacred objects or items that have to be removed in compliance with this. There's an act called NAGPRA. I think it's the Native American something Repatriation Act, something like that. And then, so there's a certain method we have to utilize and follow to remain in compliance with this act. For us here at Gila River Telecommunications has to have monitors, actual people who are on site or on construction sites to make sure that we do not disturb certain spots, I guess destruct funeral objects, pots, shards, what have you, and it costs additional to the telco because we have to pay for these cultural monitors, and these are thousands of dollars each year in additional costs. So again, somebody mentioned, or maybe both mentioned the rights of way for, it's always a concern for construction, but particularly with deploying broadband on federal land, because again, we have to get approval from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, we have to comply with environmental issues, we have to comply with the cultural laws, and it's unique to our tribe and all tribes across the country. All these factors raise additional thousands of dollars in addition to the general factors of just deploying broadband in any rural part of the state or any rural part of the country. So this is a major concern for us and for any tribe. I think it's a hindrance to many tribes for getting telecommunication services to their reservations. It's just too many regulatory hurdles. Okay, and let's move on to the next slide here. I just listed the Arizona tribes with their own telecom companies, and I listed them in order of their establishment or the creation. The oldest tribal telco here is the Gangnatham Nation, Gangnatham Utility Authority. We're next, GRTI, and then Fort Mojave, the San Carlos Apache Tribe, Salt River, which is right next door to Scottsdale, has Saddleback Communications, and the Hopi Tribe up in northern Arizona. So just for your information here. There are actually 11 tribes across the country who have their own telcos. I believe the Warm Springs tribe in Oregon has recently established their own. The Mescalero Apache tribe in New Mexico, and the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe is the oldest tribal telco in South Dakota. So, for Gila River Telecommunications, we were established in 1988. We're about 29 years old right now. It was established to address the lack of telephone service, that is plain old telephone service, to the residents here in the community. No one could afford basic telephone service because of the high construction costs, and the service provider at that time was U.S. West. They were known as U.S. West, formerly Mountain Bell, and now Century Link. And at that time, I believe only 10% of the residents had telephone service here in the community. We have a population of about 12,000 living here. A total enrollment population of about 22,000, with the other remaining living anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world. So no one could afford telephone service back in 1988. The Tribal Council decided to establish Gila River Telecommunications to address this issue. It was started with a 49-51% partnership with a group of telephone companies, rural telephone companies out of Oklahoma. So we were financed in the beginning. Our startup costs were financed through the Rural Utility Service. Back in the day, they were known as REA. We got a construction loan, and I believe we had maybe about 2 or 3 loans with them in order to build our network. Currently, we serve 100% of our reservation. Whoever wants service can have it. We've paid up our loan, which we're happy to say. Recently, we just paid that up, and we own 100% of our network. We're also 100% owned by the Gila River Indian community. So that is Gila River Telecommunications. And the next slide is about the regulatory challenges. Yay. Okay. So currently the FCC is undergoing a major universal service reform. This impacts the rural telephone companies across the country, particularly those that are rate of return carriers. Some of you may know what that is. We're able to maintain our operations, our build out, by receiving universal service funding. It's a mechanism that's administered through some agencies under the FCC, the NECA, some of you may be familiar with that, and the USAC entities. And the universal service funding is helping rural telephone companies become whole financially, because the normal business model, if we were to use the standard business model, that is revenues less expenses equals profits, if we were to use that here in the community, that would not work, because our customers could not afford the cost of what it takes to provide them service. So we have to have the subsidization for affordable service. The FCC is currently doing some changes to the way that we receive subsidies, and we are receiving less, considerably less right now than what we have in the past year since we've been in existence. So we're doing more with less, and we're providing here on Gila River fiber to the home. We're expected at some point by the FCC to raise the broadband speed. Right now we are just serving basic 10.1. It's a standard that the FCC expects us to use, but we're able to deliver 25.3 in certain areas, doing more with less. Knowing the additional costs that are unique to tribes, as mentioned earlier, all the compliance with federal laws, we have to be constantly vigilant on some of the policies enacted by the FCC. We work closely with our representatives on Capitol Hill. We do enjoy their support. It's just sometimes the FCC does not act fast enough to address some of our issues. For instance, right now we're in the process of receiving a waiver on some of the funding, the operating expenditure limitations that we have imposed upon us, because we cannot just continue to deliver affordable service to our community as it is right now. And I believe this is my last slide. Just want to share the picture here. These are the benefits that our community enjoy. We have a picture of our elders here learning about using the internet. It's a digital literacy class that GRTI from time to time schedules, and we invite the elders to learn about how to use the internet. It just, I think this picture shows it's worth 1,000 words, as it's proverbially said. And so with that, I believe that's the high-level overview of our company in deploying broadband to our community. And I want to thank you again, Maya, for the invite. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you, Belinda. If anyone has clarifying questions for Belinda, please type them in the chat box. And now we've got Mr. Bruce Holdridge giving us his presentation. Take it away, Bruce, when you are ready.
Well, thank you very much, Maya, and thank you to Local First Arizona for this opportunity. And good day, everyone. This has been a very informative webinar to date, because I found the information very diverse from both Deb Sosha as well as from Blake Mobley, and I think this complements some of it. Since GRTI is almost a 30-year-old company and is a traditional ILEC, or incumbent local exchange company, had we started this now, we probably would have a different business model than we did 30 years ago. And I think you're seeing the evolution in the industry as presented by both Blake and Deb when it comes to some of the wireless infrastructure being used and complementing more of the fiber and less of the copper environment. But because GRTI was a well-established company and using traditional funding mechanisms through subsidies from the federal government, yet we recognize that the government can't be relied upon for a long-term business opportunity. A long time ago, as the industry started to deregulate, we started to diversify GRTI, and we did so into a variety of different companies. I've listed here the 5 different companies that are subsidiary companies to GRTI. Each one has a unique fill and a unique need, which we'll cover in a little bit. But I think as you start to recognize high penetration rates and good take rates, this eventually, like any business, becomes a saturated business. And in order to survive, you need to continue to diversify and grow. We started Native Technology Solutions, which was our first subsidy, followed by Alluvion Communications, which is a traditional CLEC, which I noticed in some of the chat, there was a conversation regarding Triple Mountain under Scutui. That's the same thing as Alluvion Communications, so that we can operate throughout the state and not be restricted to just operating within the Gila River Indian community. Excuse me. We also developed the first low-power TV broadcast because we figured that it was a great platform that would complement use of the fiber network that we built. We were lucky enough to draw a interest in a partnership that has evolved into Verizon Wireless over the years. And if anybody can get into this, I would encourage it. It's been lucrative, and we hold the eligible telecommunications carrier status in that partnership, which is a requirement of every wireless partnership by the Federal Communications Commission. Lastly, we set up a company that is just a clearinghouse for individual activity. Each one of these is either regulated or registered excuse me, with the state of Arizona, the Federal Communications Commission, or the Gila River Indian Community. NTS and Alluvion are foreign corporations with the state of Arizona, Arizona Corporation Commission. Gila River Broadcasting Corporation obviously has rights from the FCC. Verizon has rights from the FCC as well. And then Graham is a formal corporation registered with the Gila River Indian Community, our parent and owner. I'll move on to the next slide. The need for NTS developed as the industry developed. When deregulation hit in 1986, and again in 1996 through the Telecom Act of 1996, it used to be that the home in your house was owned by the telephone company and you could rent it from them, and they had to provide it to you. But when deregulation hit, the telephone in your house, as well as all of the equipment for businesses behind the demarcation or inside the building, including the wiring, became the responsibility of the customer and no longer the telephone company or the cable provider. So NTS was developed in order to maintain the cabling and the customer premise equipment that is located within the business or within the house to support that customer need. Still remains a very blurry line as to who owns what between the customer and the end user. That is more and more clarifying as time goes by. Under Alluvion, the need was created because we're rural, but yet sit between Tucson and Phoenix. Businesses that started to migrate towards the Gila River Indian community wanted to look like they were still part of the Phoenix metropolitan area. A foreign exchange service, which has been around forever in the telephone industry, is used to provide a 602, 623, and 480 local area code, even though you're out here outside of that area code in the 520 area code, and it gave a local presence. And this is done through the CLEC side of the house, or the competitive local exchange carrier business, which operates off the Gila River Indian community. Next, we developed Gila River Broadcasting, which was developed to preserve cultural and community content. The Verizon Wireless, as I said, was born out of good fortune and a desire to earn additional money and revenues into the company to help build and grow it, as well as provide contributions back to the Gila River Indian community. And then we have Graham, which is the holding company for clearing between regulated and non-regulated businesses. The purpose, it's the subsidiary companies are created primarily to diversify revenue streams. We have a decreasing subsidy to the regulated industry with unpredictable regulatory oversight coming out of Washington and the FCC. Each subsidiary company fulfills a specific industry or customer need. I think we've already identified that, and each company focuses on a unique business niche. Moving on, this is some of the things that NTS currently supports, such as customer premise equipment, data phones, systems, cable, wiring, surveillance equipment, IT services, and it generates diverse revenues and jobs employing community members and non-community members, including other Native Americans that are not members of the Gila River Indian community. So it's a good job opportunity, and as I like to say, after almost 35, 40 years in the business, it's not a job, it's a great career to have. So brings a good career to a rural environment. Excuse me. The focus of Alluvion has grown from the foreign exchange to hosted PBXs, where moves, adds, changes, disconnects are all done for the consumer, not by the consumer, at no additional charge. We do co-location so that you can put your equipment in our power environment, our security environment, our air-conditioned and controlled environment, which in Arizona that's important, especially with monsoons, as well as the heat. We also provide long distance. It diversifies revenues and creates additional jobs within the community as well. And this is the entity that operates throughout the state of Arizona, but not on the Gila River Indian community. So a further business diversification to open up additional business opportunity by growing off the community and not being restricted to the rural part of the community. Another something that everybody on the phone might want to consider is you reach saturation even in your rural environment. How do you grow beyond your rural environment to create ongoing revenue streams and jobs and business stability? The focus of Gila River Broadcasting, obviously, was to create and preserve our own content, develop a nonprofit organization, create jobs. We're trying to move to webcasting right now so that we can get our signal. Oops, thank you, Belinda. Changed the slide. As well as get the signal off the community and to community members that live within Phoenix, Southern California, other parts of the United States, and eventually to other parts of the world. And everybody seems to be getting more and more off the internet for their TV, so we're moving to that environment. FNX is First Nations Experience. They are a partner of ours that provide 24/7 by 365 national North American, Native American content, and it's very interesting information. I would encourage you to either check out GRBC or FNX. The Verizon partnership operates in Arizona Rural Statistical Area 5, which is pretty much between Globe and Tucson, covers most of Gila and Pinal counties. We are a minority ownership in this. Verizon Wireless owns the other 75%. Like I said, we hold the ETC status, which is a technical requirement by the FCC. And this provides a very large diversification of revenues that go right now directly to the Gila River Indian community, to the general fund, in order to build houses, roads, schools, healthcare institutions, etc. Moving on, why rural? I actually feel that rural has the best opportunity because it's got the least competition, it has the greatest need, it's got the individual players wanted, which are preferred over the corporate large big boys. They are usually, the rural area is usually avoided by the corporate large companies because the rate of return just doesn't meet their needs. And I do believe, and we've talked about this, I think, in every presentation now, partnerships are key to the success of operating in rural environments. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation. And I thank you for this opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you, Bruce. We have a question for you in the comment box if you all want to address that, saying, does the area served by GRTI have any fiber now? And what's the GRTI's or its subsidies role in broadband? So right now, for our participants, if you have any other questions, or we're holding back till our Q&A, this is that portion. So please feel free to type them out and I will read them for you and get those answered. And while we wait for our answers and questions, I just want to talk to you all a little bit more about what's coming up next. So we have the Rural Policy Forum happening in just 2 weeks. And for anyone who isn't familiar with that, that is a statewide initiative brought to you by the Arizona Rural Development Council and Local First Arizona Foundation that highlights rural communities throughout the state. And it's pretty much this whole webinar stemmed from the Rural Policy Forum. And we talk about the issues that people had more interest in from past forums. So if you have not already registered to attend, I highly suggest you check out the website, which I have just put into the chat box for your viewing. Ticket sales will end probably. Actually, I think you can still buy tickets once you get to the forum. So better late than never. And then you can see me in person and engage on a variety of topics from tourism to economic development to healthcare. Deb Sosha, who is our first presenter, is going to be there speaking about her broadband conference that she held this a couple months ago. Please check that out. If you have any other information or questions that you want to reach out to me about, this is my contact information. And I look forward to hearing from you and or seeing you at the forum. Bruce, do we have an answer to that question from Jenna?
Yes, Maya, and we're happy to answer that. So does the area served by GRTI have any fiber now? Yes, we do. All of our transport is 100% fiber in a fiber ring architecture, if you're familiar with ring topology and sonnet environments. Right now, the drops that go to the houses are a combination of both fiber and copper. It's about 60-40 copper to fiber. The company's direction between now and 2019 is to become 100% fiber to the home, which would be a 100% fiber optic network, both from the drop as well as to the transport. We are currently a total IP, or Internet Protocol, network using a Metaswitch platform. And then what is GRTI's subsidiary roles in the broadband? That's a very astute question, Jenna, and Graham, which is the Gila River Asset Management Corporation, is currently the broker, shall we say, of the broadband services between GRTI and our primary provider, Level 3, as well as some of the NECA requirements that we have between the organizations. And so we also use Native Technology Solutions to install the GigaCenter, which is the equivalent of a, what do I want to call it? It's the equivalent of the fiber optics that terminate on the house between the fiber optics into the electrical optics within the house. So we use native technology solutions to also install some of that customer premise equipment as well. Does that answer your question?
There is yes. And there's another GRTI question that just came through.
An open network architecture, yes, we do. We are not dependent to any proprietary network architecture at all, and we believe that that is the right way to go for future development and interconnection between us and other networks around us as well as nationally.
Awesome.
And Jenna, I see where you've said yes to answering the question. Thank you.
And just one more note for our out-of-state participants, you are also very welcome to attend the Rural Policy Forum. We host many people from around the country, and one of our keynote speakers is actually flying in directly from New Zealand from presenting over there. So we've got a host of wonderful speakers, over 60 presenters from around our state. So if we have no more questions, I would like to thank our speakers one more time for the wealth of knowledge that they shared with us today. And once again, I will get you this recording and the PowerPoints in approximately 1 week. So look forward to those. And thank you for participating in our Solutions for Rural Development webinar series. Thank you.